Have you ever been someplace so special that you had a hard time describing it to others? Well, after traveling for 2 days driving north, we found our way to Ely, Minnesota. This is our jumping off spot, if you will, for our Boundary Waters trip. It's a quaint little town, northern Minnesota, near the Canadian border, and it's adjacent to the Boundary Waters Wilderness area. It consists of over 1 million acres, and it's got over 1,200 miles of canoe routes. It's got hiking trails, and it has several designated campsites. It adjoins the Canadian provincial park, the Quetico Park, making it a massive wilderness area. This trip, we're entering the Boundary Waters at entry point 27, Snowbank Lake, and I know what I'm looking for is only one portage away. Many years ago, several friends and I were talking about a trip to the Boundary Waters that never come to fruition, whether it be family, work, schedules, many other reasons that kept us from this adventure. But in September of last year, this was my second trip to the Boundary Waters, and many years after I'd first heard of this place. It's an extremely long drive from western North Carolina to northern Minnesota, but each state we passed through, it held its own beauty in its right. But there's something about the Northwoods of Minnesota. There's something about it. Haven't quite figured it out. Haven't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it's the remoteness. Maybe it's the difference in wildlife and terrain. Maybe it's the cell phones don't work. But if it's adventure you crave, if it's the solitude you crave, if you want a digital detox, it's only one portage away. As I paddle along, I'm careful with the paddle, careful not to bang into the gunnels, listening to the rhythm of the paddle as we cross first one lake, then the next, propelling us to the next campsite on Osub Lake. You may be asking, what's this one portage away thing that I'm talking about? Well, once you cross the entry point lake, you come to a trail that takes you across to the next lake. It's measured in rods. A rod equals approximately 16 and a half feet, and our first portage was 140 rods. 2,300 plus feet, almost a half a mile long. Yep, you carry all your packs and then your canoe across the portage, and when you get there, depending on the day of the week that you begin your adventure, you stand a very good chance of not seeing another person for your entire trip. In a very large wilderness area, avoid the masses where you can find the tranquility and solitude. Adventures into the Boundary Waters require a bit of planning. Permits are required for entry into the Boundary Waters, and with most adventures, planning is always part of the adventure. And luckily for me, I didn't have to do any of the food planning. If it was left up to me, we would have probably ate crappy freeze-dried food, which isn't healthy for you, and they're not very tasty anyway. But we ate like kings. And like planning for any other adventure trip, you need to plan for all kinds of weather. And we had a little bit of rain, and the temperatures did cool down a little bit, but nothing too harsh. It was very pleasant weather, very enjoyable weather. But this trip was an out and back. So we went out to Allsub Lake, and then we made our way over to Jordan Lake, visiting some new areas that we hadn't been and some of the lakes that we had visited on the previous trip. The water was beginning to cool, but it was still warm enough for a brief dip in the evening. Maybe the next adventure into the Boundary Waters can be a few weeks earlier. Enjoy the water a little bit more. If you are the adventurous type like myself, you would enjoy the wilderness of the Boundary Waters. I find the challenge of moving from point A to point B, setting up camp, cooking, cleaning up, and preparing for the next day's travel pleasant and fulfilling. Kind of like backpacking, only by way of canoe. The beauty of the Northwoods will draw you deeper into the wilderness to see what's around the next bend in the river or what the next lake will be like. Using a map and compass to navigate, you'll explore waterfalls. Heck, you can even have a picnic in the stream, just like we did. My hope is, while I struggle to capture with words how special the Boundary Waters is to me, but I hope this video can begin to show through the pictures and videos just how special a place this is. Not my usual riding the thin lines of moto adventure, but it is adventure in itself. So if you can, get out there and ride. And if you can, ride a thin line road.